Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Every Man Has a Story. I'm so excited about my new guest. Reached out to me and sent me an email, was telling me some really interesting things that he's done in his life, and so I'm really excited to talk to him. He's a veteran. He's a former law enforcement officer, which they always have great stories. He's been a hunter, and he also looks for fossils, which fascinates me. And I'm hoping he'll tell me some more about that. I've always wanted to find an ancient fossil. So thank you so much, Randy, for joining me. And so you're in your camper right now, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Next to my house, but I probably live in my camper about 6 months of the year or better, and I'm more
No
comfortable.
kidding.
So,
Is it one of the ones you tow behind a truck, or is it one you drive?
this one here is a fifth wheel, so I pull it
Oh
behind
yeah,
the truck. It's
those are
just,
the big ones.
oh yeah, this one's 29 feet. It's 30 years,
Whoa.
and it was one of the really good ones, and I use that during the wintertime when I have my wife along, and then I've got a truck camper mounted on a gooseneck trailer. It's also 29 feet that I use when I'm chasing bones.
Wow. Wow. Um, so what kind of truck you got? A big diesel?
No, I had diesels right up until a couple of years ago, and I bought a gasser because those diesels were costing me $400 or $500 a month in maintenance. And
Really? And
yeah,
maintenance? Why?
well, it's just the repairs. If you got a fuel injector or something's going bad, well, you might as well as replace all of them. Then you got 3,000 bucks. Every time
Whoa.
around it was 500,000 suspension or whatever. So I thought this gasser would solve my problem. But I'll
What
tell
kind
you,
of gasser is it?
oh, it's just a Chevy 2500 heavy duty.
Hmm.
I thought there was something wrong with it when I first used it because the RPMs are way up there compared to diesel, and it didn't sound like it was shifting right. But I got used to it, and that's the way they
Hmm.
are. And it has been cheaper for me to operate, even considering I get less gas mileage.
Now, do you travel like all over the country? You stay within South Dakota?
Oh, I mostly travel the Great Plains. I start up in South Dakota, go down through Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and then as it gets colder, I work my way down to Oklahoma and Texas, East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, down in there. Just
Wow.
how far that cold weather chases me because it just hurts me anymore. So,
And so you do all this to look for fossils, is that right?
a lot of it. We get into the winter. I bring my wife along. We go down south, so my fossil hunting's a little bit limited. But for the most part, through the rest of the year, as long as there's not ice on the water, I'm looking for ice age bones, pretty much.
Now, how do you go about, like, what tells you that or gives you a hint that that's a good place to look? Like, what are you looking for as a hunter to find? Say, if you're looking for mammoth, what are you looking for?
Well, first I got to have a location where they were in the Great Plains. There's nothing better than the Great Plains, all the way from Alberta, all the way down through Texas. That's where all these big animals migrated. So you had millions of bisons for tens of thousands of years. You had millions of mammoths for the same amount of time. They migrated across this area, um, as far as I know, twice a year. So they
Can
left.
you imagine what that looked like to go back in time and stand there and see these giant animals just at the Great Plains? And it must have been spectacular.
It is. I've read accounts. Now, these are from the 19th century. They talk about waiting for days for that herd to cross and that the sky just being dark, And when they came up on the rivers like the Missouri River, not far from me, those bison and the mammoth, they cross that river. And bison are and I don't know about mammoth, but bison are kind of like a cow or cattle. When you get them in the river and you have a current going one way and they're trying to cross, they get confused. They start milling around. And if they get to a bank that they can't get up, they won't swim downstream to get to cross. They'll just mill there and they'll drown. And
Oh,
the pioneer said that there were bloated carcasses that were so thick that you could walk across the Missouri River on them.
No kidding.
So you can figure this happened once or twice a year for tens of thousands of years. So there are the bison and just keep rolling out of there. And the mammoth, I find enough of those too, along with giant sloth and giant beaver and elk and a lot of other things.
Well, the mammoth, like, when is the last time they were on Earth? When did they go extinct? Wasn't it like 12, 13,000 years ago when the last meteor hit the Earth?
Oh no, there's an island. I can't recall where it was,
Oh,
but
yeah, I heard about this. Yeah.
3,000 years ago.
Mm.
Some of the mammoth out here have been dated to about 8,000 years ago. So
Really? That recent?
yeah, a couple thousand years after the last big sheets of ice had melted and receded back.
Mm. Yeah. I lived in Kentucky for a long time, still have family there. And back, I don't know how many thousands of years ago, not that long ago, there was a mile of ice, above Kentucky. The whole state was completely covered in ice, which is
Yeah,
hard to imagine. Like half the United States was covered in ice.
yeah, yeah. It was in some of the places. It was over 10,000 feet thick, and that
Unbelievable.
compressed the earth underneath down. I mean, formed a lot agates and a lot of your really cool to me geological formations. And then when it receded, some of these big rivers, I think like the Missouri, which was formed by the melting and erosion of the glacier, once that glacier pulled back, the land actually rose up. So you have
Hmm.
some river systems that maybe have 100 feet or better of under till underneath. That's all glacial till. So
Wow.
I go down these rivers. I have people ask me, "Hey, man, you're going to find all the bones here, and there aren't going to be any left for anybody else to pick up." But these bones are eroding out of there every year, and within a couple of years, they're destroyed. And they come up
Hmm.
that clay, they get in the air, the current and the water and everything else, they rip them apart very quickly. So
Hmm.
I encourage anybody who sees one to pick it up. It's not going to be there long.
What's the most exciting thing you've ever found?
Well, I had beginner's luck, and it kind of spoiled me. I've only been doing this about 3 years. So, about 3 years ago, I had been in Sioux City, Iowa, and we were visiting my wife's cousins. And I was getting a little bored. I get antsy all the time. So, I went out and I walked in a ravine, and there's a little bit of water flowing. It's kind of interesting. And I found my first bison skull, and it
Hmm.
was 26-inch horn span, which is pretty good size. It got me interested. I got on Facebook groups and got a hold of some other guys who are kind of looking for them. So then, probably within 3 months, I went down to a small river by my home, and I was kayaking, and I look up in the sandbar. I think I see a piece of curved PVC pipe, about 8-inch pipe or maybe a 10-inch pipe laying there. Looked in bad shape. I was pulled up and started to look at it. It was a mammoth tusk. And
No
people
kidding.
live their whole life as hobbyists around here and look for that, never find one. I'm brand new because
Whoa.
it was within 100 feet of a bridge, and you could
How
look from
long? How long was it?
32 inches,
No kidding.
about 10 inches in diameter, weighed about 40 pounds. Um,
Amazing.
it was a fight to keep it together and to get it out of there. There's a whole process, and those things just fall apart real quick. I probably
Now, I've
lost.
seen they find a lot of them in Siberia, like when the permafrost is melting, and those are apparently in pretty good shape.
It's a whole different situation because they are frozen for all that
Hmm.
time. Here, the
Hmm.
mammoth tusks are preserved. The ones that last are preserved in clay. It's blue clay. We call it vivianite. And once they wash out of that clay from the river, boy, they come apart fast. And that's the only time we ever find them because I can't dig them out of that stuff. Where
Hmm.
get up to Siberia, Russia up in there, even in Alaska in some places, they're frozen solid. And a lot of the stuff you get out of there looks like it was the animal died last year.
Have you
There's,
been up to Alaska to hunt there and see if you can find some frozen ones?
oh, I want to go, but it takes, you have to know somebody. Alaska's a big state. You can get in trouble out there. And I
Hmm.
really need a good guide. And we're kind of working on it because I want one of the Priscus bison. It's called the Bison Priscus,
Hmm.
25,000 years old or more. I want
Hmm.
one of those. The only where I'm going to really get lucky and find one is in Alaska. So I hope that me and a couple other guys can make the right connections and find one.
Hmm. I was watching a documentary about Siberia, and they were talking about global warming, and they were saying that uh, the Earth was better, or there was less carbon in the air, or whatever, because of the bison and the large animals were keeping the trees down, and all this grass was growing. And they're doing an experiment there in Siberia, this scientist, and they're cloning. They're trying to clone mammoths and the large rhinoceroses and some of these other great animals, and reintroducing them in Siberia to help protect the permafrost, because the permafrost is melting, and they think that's going to release a whole lot of CO2, I think it is, into the atmosphere. And so you're going to do a test within like 10,000 square kilometers or whatever. If that works, they're going to have mammoths in Siberia, which I would fly there to see those. I mean, that would be incredible if they could actually bring back the mammoth and the giant rhinoceroses and some of these other animals.
Yeah, the bison is my favorite animal. Same thing here. I can get up to Yellowstone, or we were just in Black Hills of South Dakota last week, and to see those majestic bison uh,
Mm.
and the herds of them is pretty awesome to me.
Yeah. So when you're looking for these things, have you ever found anything else, like for example, arrowheads or petroglyphs from Native Americans that were there? Like I lived in Utah for a long time, and you have the Anasazi who were there for, they say, as long as 15,000 years ago.
Yeah, I find a few arrowheads, but you really got to have an eye for them. My son does, and he finds a fair amount. I find some pottery, which is pretty cool, and then there's just a lot of pipestone around South Dakota.
Hmm.
The Sioux are pretty well known for their use of pipestone for carving and things. We find that in the river, pieces that they've thrown away and that they've actually carved on or they broke, which to me
Mm.
is just as interesting as a find is finding a beautiful specimen of a Lakota pipe. Uh,
Mm.
I found a beautiful femur for a giant beaver. They were as big
Wow.
as a black bear.
No kidding.
Yeah, they were a good size animal, and actually, the modern beaver for quite a few years lived right alongside the giant beaver. They had different
Mm.
territories. It's like the mammoth and the mastodon. The mastodon chewed brush and lived in a brushy environment. And when the terrain changed to massive grasslands, the mastodon kind of faded away and the mammoth came in. And you can tell that by looking at their teeth. What
I
the
didn't know that. I did not know that. Well,
uh,
can you imagine how big the trees were back then when there's nobody to cut them down? There must have been redwoods and oaks that were just giant trees that, could grow for hundreds and hundreds of years unmolested.
Yeah, yeah, and thousands of miles, thousands of square miles of grasslands with grass higher than my head. And
Mm.
all these bison and really the whole terrain relied on the bison and the mammoth to eat that grass, and their manure fed everything, and they trample it down. I mean, they transformed the landscape. Once they were gone, we started getting a lot more brush and
Mm.
trees, that kind of stuff in.
Just imagine what the rivers and lakes were like too. They must have been pristine, like crystal clear everywhere you went, and
Yeah.
huge fish in there that bass and trout that have had their whole life to grow and never get caught, and must have been amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure it was.
So, you had mentioned to me in your email that you were also a law enforcement officer and that you used to chase fugitives. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I've been treasure hunter, collector my whole life. I remember as a little kid, I was going through these old houses in my small town that had been abandoned and picking
Oh,
up
I did. I loved doing that when I was a kid. Loved it.
envelopes with old stamps, old kerosene heaters. I mean, just
Yeah.
thing I haul home. So I was employed by the U.S. Marshal Service in 1986 till 2012, December.
Oh,
And I just continued. I hunt at the time. Prior to that, I hunted deer. I hunted every kind of animal. I trapped as a kid in high school. But once I really got onto the Marshal Service and worked fugitive warrants, I worked almost exclusively cold cases, and
really?
that's all I did.
So would they like give you a file and say, okay, we're trying to find this guy and just turn it over to you and you just like started digging and trying to hunt the guy down? Or how does
Yeah,
that work
before computers,
before
it,
computers?
it was all
How do
done.
you start? How do you start when they give you a file? Like, what's the first thing you do?
You go back to the beginning. You got a file, and people have worked it over the year. They got all your notes, and let's say the guy's been gone for 20 years. He's
20 years.
smuggled.
Wow.
He's got money. He's a smuggler. Let's say some back then it was we didn't have meth, and you got a marijuana smuggler. He's very successful. He's bringing in thousands of pounds. He's very smart. He's eluded law enforcement. Has warrants out for him for 20 plus years. He gets arrested, but he gets arrested under a false name. He posts his bond. By the time he gets out, um, he's not, the paperwork doesn't catch up with him. So he gets out, and then a little later, they find out through the fingerprints, well, gee, this guy's wanted here and here and here, but they never catch up to him. So that whole case builds. So I mainly just start out from the very beginning, from where he grew up, what he did, his first arrest, and then go out and start interviewing people. And
Wow.
yeah, you just work it. It's a lot of surveillance, a lot of
And,
boredom because you
and
don't
it's
know.
just you just doing it by yourself.
Well, back in the early days of the Marshal Service, it was two of us usually, and for probably 10 years or 15 years, it was just two of us. And we weren't working the violent, crazy fugitives that our Marshal Service is working today, which now we have task forces that work the most violent fugitives. They don't have to be federal, they can be state, local, and they get together. They're
Hmm.
dangerous. When I started, we didn't have so much of that. I'd have a smuggler that, maybe brought in 10, 20,000 pounds of marijuana a year, started out doing
God, that's a lot.
when he's in college. I heard good stories from these guys. I had one in particular. He was from Texas. He was in college there, went to Baylor University. His father was a district attorney there in the town, very respectable family, but he he found out that he can make a little extra money if he would go down, cross the Rio Grande a few times a year, and he'd get a backpack full of pot, 40
Hmm.
pounds maybe, and he'd bring it back. So he did that a while. He told some of his friends out of this same fraternity how he's doing it. They're like, heck yeah, when we get in on this a little bit. So a group of them would start bringing in just 40, 50 pounds. And then later on, they decide, well, heck, when that river's low, we can drive pickup across. Four-wheel drive pickup. We'll go pick up. We pick up a couple 100 pounds and get back. And he'd done that
Hmm.
for a while, was successful, but he got scared. One time he ran in the Mexican army, and they chased him through the desert. And his story to me was that he broke the motor mounts in his truck because he's going through the desert, just trying to get to the Rio Grande, trying to evade the Mexican army. Finally, the truck quit with the motor mounts broke. He run. He's in West cowboy boots, just tearing.
Can't run of those.
Yeah, this guy's like 6 foot, 3'4", 250 pounds. Well,
Wow.
he makes it to the Rio Grande and hides on a shrimp boat for the night. And he tells me the next day he calls a friend who's from the same university he went to and asked her if she can come pick him up. So she says, sure. She goes down there, she picks him up and brings him to her house. And he spends a few days there recuperating. And I find out the house is the house of the U.S. Marshal down in South Texas.
Oh man!
You know,
Wow.
yeah, more stories like that. We got along because he used to trap and he's a big hunter. And that's how I kind of got to know him and kind of got information. He called me Trapper. So I've got just good stories from the guy. In fact, after he got out of prison, I went down to visit him.
No kidding.
And
How'd you catch him though? Where'd you catch him? How the day you got him? How was that? What
well,
happened?
um, I developed a lot of leads over time and got leads from a few other deputies in different districts. And we just got frustrated at some point and decided, let's pick a day. Let's go and interview all these people that we got leads on who seem to be fairly close. See if we can scare this guy up, get him moving around. I was in Austin, Texas at the time, and had some friends in Waco, Texas, and a few other places. And so that night we just hit it hard. So we're after this guy, and we got some information that he had a good friend in Austin who was a bartender, and that he worked at a bar near the university in Austin. And this time he was about 50 years old. So it was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. My partner and I are deciding, well, we're going to go home or what. And we had that one lead left on this bartender, and we got information from a couple of sources. We're able to figure out who he was. So we decided, well, a bartender is up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Probably let's just go over there and knock on the door. So we went down there and beat on the door, and pretty soon this guy opens up the door just a couple of inches. He's looking out there. He's got a towel around him, big burly. I mean, he looked like a bear, big burly guy. And I look at my partner. I said, "Is that him?" He's like, "Yeah, I think so." Well, our picture that we had of him was when he was in college. Now he's a 50-year-old man. So the guy said, "Wait a minute, let me close the door and get some clothes on." I said, "Hell no." So we pushed the door on him, and it was him.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about did you get the other guys? Is
Uh,
the other guys, did you catch any of the other guys that were with them that were working with them?
oh, yeah, we worked that whole group. I think there were probably about 7 of them. It took us about 5 years. And if I recall correctly, we got all of them. And all of them were
So,
under years old, the Warrens out of West
well,
Texas.
so when you arrested him, was he still smuggling pot?
Oh, yeah.
No
Yep.
kidding.
He was bringing in by airplane by that time. They had
Oh, he moved up.
T-bone. Yeah, it was called a T-bone, and they hired a pilot. And actually, this fugitive, just called Bob, he learned how to fly a plane, and so he brought a lot of it over. But his whole thing, I don't think this guy was dangerous, but there's a lot of money, so people get killed over pot.
Well, was he living large? Is that like did he have a fancy house or anything, or was he living conservative?
No, Bob didn't. He was a hunter, fisherman. So in the wintertime, he headed to Alaska, and he goes so far out in there. He was like a survivalist in a canvas tent in the middle of the winter. He'd be out there hunting, and they'd drop him off with a plane. He'd stay out there a couple of months.
Unbelievable. You'd
True.
think he would have made enough money over the years so he wouldn't have to be doing it anymore. He could have just like retired and then,
His family had the money. I mean, he had the
huh,
money. It was just a
huh,
venture. It was a venture for him.
huh.
You know,
Wow.
here I
So
caught
how
him.
long did he get sent? How long did he have to stay in prison?
Oh, I think he ended up being in about 6 years or so. It wasn't well, it's a long time for most of us, but it wasn't at all that long considering.
And he got out, and so he's out now, huh?
Well,
And now marijuana is legal, like most places.
it needs to be. It
Yeah,
needs takes
that's
all
interesting.
the money out of it.
Yeah.
Once you take the money out of it, it's no longer a dangerous drug, in my opinion. I mean, other people have other opinions.
Hmm. Yeah, I got another friend of mine's retired law enforcement officer also. He lives here in the Philippines now, but he says he thinks it's a really dangerous drug and that he's seen people do crazy things on marijuana, so he thinks it shouldn't be legal.
I think
Um,
I think I know what you're talking about. I guess they were probably would have had THC in their blood when they did something crazy. But the old adage by a lot of us old cops is we never really had to fight anybody who was high on pot.
yeah, that's what I've heard too. Yeah, just
Yeah,
kind of peaceful.
yeah. Now the
Wow.
smugglers that are bringing the pot in, they're moving these hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can get killed over. But
Yeah.
a guy just smoking pot.
Mm.
I just don't see it. We spend way too much time, way too much money, and we'd make it a lot less dangerous if we would just legalize it. In South Dakota, of all places, I never believed it. We're very conservative, as not only um, okay the legalization of medical marijuana, but they also have recreational.
I didn't know that. Well, I
Yeah,
lived in Kentucky for 15 years, and I'd read somewhere that the biggest cash crop in Kentucky is marijuana, even though it's illegal still. They don't even have medical marijuana in Kentucky.
it's the biggest. I believe it is. As I recall, it was the biggest cash crop in the U.S.
No kidding.
Cash crop.
Wow. Huh, interesting.
Yeah, I
So
found
what?
400, $500,000 in a place. 50 guns, and some of these smugglers on one of them that we got. So yeah, a lot of money, a lot of danger. People were killed over it. So
Well,
let's.
don't you think this guy, like, if he was smart? I mean, if it was you or me, I mean, wouldn't you stash a bunch of cash in a bunch of places, like in a cave somewhere in plastic bags, so if you ever went to prison, when you got out, you'd have some money? I mean,
Yeah,
it
that
seems
was.
like
He,
it seems like that's what I would do, or maybe even gold or something like that, something that
yeah,
doesn't deteriorate.
he put it in storage units, and it would just
Oh,
buy a toolbox like you put in the back of your pickup with a little key
yeah.
on it. He'd rent a storage unit. He'd stick that in there, put the cash in, lock it up, and sometimes He told me that he had so many of those he'd forget where they were. He lost
You ever
track.
seen that show on the History Channel, The Storage Wars, where they bid on the lockers that they haven't paid anything for you, and go in there, open one up, and it's full of cash?
Boy, that'd be my dream.
Wow. Have you ever found? You said you look for treasure. What kind of treasure you found? Anything?
I was stationed in Saipan, I don't know if you can call this treasure anyway, northern Mariana Islands for several years, and I retired out of there. And I metal detected, so I was probably one of the first few people who have ever metal detected on those beaches. And we had tourists for 30, 40 years, Russians, Europeans, Thai, who
Mm.
out there, they lose their jewelry in there. So first time when I started metal detecting out on that beach, I'd I always got these kids. They're following me all the way down the beach, little native kids. And finally I said, okay, now when I get a signal, I'm pointing at you, dig it up, you find something, you bring it to me. So this is Sunday afternoon, a lot of people there. And pretty soon I got this little kid running up to me, and he's got his hand out. Look, look, look. I find it. It's a tie bracelet. I can't remember what the carat is on that. 22 maybe, and it's a
Well,
shape like bamboo, and it's a child
mm,
bracelet. So it wasn't
mm,
enough. But I'm like,
mm.
okay, thank you.
Wow.
And so after that, I started metal detecting at night out there and to avoid the crowds, and had some interesting encounters with manta rays. I
Mm.
thought it was a shark. I got hit in the back of the leg when I'm in waist deep water in a moonlit night, and scared the crap out of me. And
Yeah, that can hurt.
yeah, yeah. So I started watching. Pretty soon, the shadow come. To me, it looked like he was 10 feet wide and come right on by me, just swimming nice and slow. And um, I noticed it's a manta ray. He's probably 6 or 8 foot across.
God,
Big one.
that's a big one. That's big.
Yeah, good size, swimming right on by me. And then I noticed a lot of times it was out at night in the bay there, those manta rays would come, and I don't know if it was a signal from my detector or what it was, but I think I attracted them.
Hmm.
it was pretty cool to see them, and they never caused me any
Yeah,
problems.
they're harmless if you don't step
Yeah,
on them or try and grab their tail or something.
yeah, I
Huh.
don't think they have a barb on them. It's not the stingray.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah, I don't think there's any danger with them at all, but the
Hmm.
natives will, spear them and eat them.
Hmm. Yeah, I've always wanted to get a metal detector, and my daughters live in England, and over there, all the time, people are finding like pots of gold and all kinds of different things over there. And because when going all the way back to the Romans, before there was a battle, the men would take their whatever money they had, they bury it someplace so that if they were captured or killed, that the enemy didn't get their money. Then they go back and dig it up after the battle, and those are like all over, I guess all over Europe. But I
Oh,
would love to find something like that. That'd be so cool.
I mean, our definition of treasure and being ancient is a couple of 100 years old as far as European
Mm.
influence in the U.S. When you get over to Europe, but it's pretty darn amazing the stuff they come across. I did some metal detecting on Panglao Island in the Philippines, and my metal detector is still over there, and now it's on Mindanao by, I think it's Bonai,
Mm.
Agum City area. So I'm going to have to retrieve that when I get up there again and do a little detecting.
Now, what were you doing in the Philippines?
Um, my son, when we moved to
Oh,
Saipan,
that's right. You told me. Yeah, your
yeah,
son.
my son came along. He married a Filipina from Saipan, and she's got
No kidding. Huh.
family in Mindanao.
Huh.
So bought some property on Panglao through my daughter-in-law, and now I guess they have an international airport there and everything, so the property's worth some money. So
Huh.
we'll
Interesting.
sell it and get something by Tagum City if we ever make it back there.
Hmm. So, what's the coolest thing you've ever found metal detecting? You ever found like any ancient coins or old coins, or like I know in America you can find Civil War, things
Yeah,
like from the 1800s are pretty easy to find, like all over.
yeah. I have a hard time around here. What I find is roofing nails and chewing gum wrappers and
Hmm.
aluminum up tabs and that kind of thing. But when I was on Saipan, I found a lot of, along with the tourist gold, I found a lot of World War II stuff. And I mean, there's just a couple of things. I had one day I found a bunch of buttons off of a Japanese soldier's uniform, and there were some Japanese out there, and I was talking with a couple of them, and I showed them what I had. They were, I don't know if you call it impressed, awestruck, or just very respectful of that, and I gave them
Hmm.
to them, and that was a nice moment, you
Yeah,
know.
it is. Well, huh.
And I didn't find these, but a friend found dog tags for belonging to an American Marine who was there on Saipan and fought. And they asked me, they knew that I looked for this stuff and kind of collected it. I looked for human remains and that kind of thing to get them returned. So they asked me if I could find any information on these dog tags. I got pretty lucky. I found the guy, and he was in a retirement home in Maryland.
Oh, he's still alive.
Yeah, he was still alive.
Okay, you think if you lose your dog tags, you're dead. Gee.
Yeah, he was in his 80s, and he's a retired corporate attorney, and he's in a home
No
in
kidding.
Maryland. So I went to our senator there on the island, and I asked him, "Can we get this guy a certificate when I send him these dog tags back?" He's pretty excited about them, and senator said, "I can do better than that. I'll be in D.C. next month. I'll take them to him."
No kidding. Wow.
He and then the U.S. Attorney out of Maryland made a big presentation to him. Richard Urey is his name. He's passed now, but they made that presentation. Plus, they did kind of a ceremony for all the old vets that were in that home. And Mr. Urey said, aside from my children and my grandkids, this is one of the most amazing, memorable things that's ever happened to me.
Hmm.
And it's a simple thing. I just gave him a dog
Yeah.
back, but that was really something, you know.
Well. I bet. Wow, that's so nice. Hmm. Is there any place that you've ever dreamed of going and metal detecting? Like any place like on your bucket list or where you'd like to go? And like I think someplace like Egypt or Europe or someplace like that, and find things that are like thousands of years old would be cool.
Uh, I'd love to do that, but my heart's in Southeast Asia.
No kidding. Hmm.
Uh,
Well, you know, they say there's a lot of gold here in the Philippines that the Japanese hid.
yeah, you always hear about the treasure there. And when I brought that metal detector, all the Filipinos are asking me about that. And the government kind of frowns on that a little bit.
Yeah, I've
So
heard that you're not even allowed to look for gold here, you know.
yeah, not really. I found a few. I found coins and some old American coins that were minted in the Philippines, and it actually said is a dime, United States of America, Philippines territory or something, where it was
No
minted.
kidding. I
Yeah,
didn't know that. Well, huh.
they're there.
Minted American coins minted in the Philippines. Well, were they silver?
Yeah, yeah. It would have been silver then.
Wow, those would be collectible.
Yeah, been
Huh.
right around World War II. I can't remember right now what the dates were, but most of the stuff I found were between 40 and 60,
Hmm.
something there. So,
Well, the
but
Americans controlled the Philippines after the Spanish-American War for a while, and then they had the war between America and the Philippines, and then we finally left.
yeah, my daughter-in-law's grandfather was in the army in the Philippines, and he actually in 1903 came to the U.S. to the World's Fair. I don't remember where it was at, but was brought up for an exhibition, and they had the Filipinos with their way of life and everything, their little village and all that
Hmm.
set up here, and he came along on that. So, and he fought in
Uh,
the U.S. and
interesting, interesting.
yeah, a
So,
lot.
go on.
In Saipan, a lot of my hunting I did with a Japanese friend, looking for these World War II ammunitions and remains.
Oh,
And
remains, huh?
yeah, I've never found American soldiers' remains. I found some dog tags, but we did find Japanese soldiers' remains. They were in every crack and crevice in that jungle, you
No
know.
kidding. Huh.
So I asked him, I said, how does it feel? Here I am, American citizen, former soldier, U.S. Marshal, represent the federal government, out here looking for these remains and stuff with you being a Japanese citizen and everything. It's kind of interesting contrast. And he just said that we're different people now, different culture, basically, and we're friends. And he appreciated being able to go out with me and to explore all these caves and things and
Hmm.
return remains that we found. So
Well, the thing is, neither one of you were even alive when the war took place, so it's like you can't blame people for something their grandparents did, you know.
oh, they do there,
Mm,
in
mm.
the U.S. But with their situations with various races, we're still blamed for what our
Yeah, I
grand.
know. Like this, the South Koreans and the Japanese still don't get along to this day.
Oh no, no, they don't. That's for
Mm,
sure.
mm. So, when's your next adventure? Where are you going to go next?
Well, we're planning. Right now, I'm hitting the rivers locally, but I'm planning on heading with my wife. It's going to be getting cooler, so in October we're going to start heading down south. And I belong to the Special Operations Group of the U.S. Marshals Service in the '80s and '90s, and we're having our 50th Special Operations Group reunion in Louisiana. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, we'll go there and get together with some of the old guys that were the first members of that group, and then with some of the young guys who are head and shoulders over training and equipment and everything over what we used to be. So that'll be a fun time.
Mm.
And after that, I'll kind of, I don't know, be in Louisiana, Mississippi, East Texas, probably till Christmas, come back for Christmas, and then with any luck, we'll head out again and
Mm.
get out there somewhere.
Do you have one of those passes where you can stay at campgrounds for discounted prices, or?
Yeah, no, it isn't hardly worth it for me. I like to stay in municipal little campgrounds in a city park in a small town or in a county park. You
Mm.
know, out that often, you just can't pay. I can't pay $35, $45 a night for these places. So I look,
Oh, it's that much, huh? Wow, that's as much as a cheap
yeah,
hotel room. Wow.
yeah,
Mm.
well, yeah. Now hotel rooms, you can't find a Motel 6 costs you $100.
Yeah. And you say it's called the Motel Sixes. It used to be $6.
I know for $8 bucks.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
our
Mm.
lifetimes, but I'd stay in the county parks and the cities. Sometimes they're free with the municipal ones, and then maybe $12, $15 with county parks.
Mm. Well, going back to law enforcement, in your opinion, I'm sure you still have friends that are in law enforcement. Do you think that crime has gotten worse, or do you think it's getting better? Or as far as America, like how do you see things?
You know, I've been out 10 years. Most of the guys that I worked with are also out now, but social media has skewed everything so bad. But I think it's gotten worse, and I'm scared for officers out there. Uh, you're judged by social media now, and I think that is the biggest culprit in creating all these damn issues we got today.
Yeah, my other friend told me the same thing. That's why he retired early. Is he got tired of like people thinking he was a criminal,
Yeah,
just
Tim,
because of Tim. Yeah.
I follow
Mm.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, gee, I'm glad I'm not there today, and I've got three family members that were police officers, and I wouldn't encourage anybody to do it today.
No kidding. Huh.
Just you're judged right away, and the politicians, the community leaders, under a hell of a lot of pressure from these outspoken people to convict immediately in the media and wash their hands of it and everything else because they're scared for their political future too.
Right.
I don't know
Mm.
what it will take to change. I think it will.
Mm.
Usually we kind of look, oh, I did, and I think a lot of my friends did too. You look at things as a pendulum, swings way one way and then way the other way, and then hopefully it comes down in the middle. And I'm
Mm.
hoping that we're just about to the end of the chaos, and things will, people start realizing that social media just,
Mm.
is divisive, and it's just done in there to create chaos, and they're hard to tell what truth and what isn't. And,
Mm.
and if we all start down like I did, I've turned it all off practically.
Yeah, I hardly watch the news anymore at all. I've just kind of gotten tired of listening to it.
Right. Yeah. I don't watch any news except for what I'll pull up on YouTube. I can choose local
Yeah.
news, whatever,
Mm.
and do that because otherwise I'm mad. When Trump first got in, and I did vote for him, but I was mad all the time. And you're mad
Mm.
at friends that are Democrats, and your friends are mad at you, and all this stuff. Most of it's probably not even true. That's dividing you.
Well, families were splitting up over it. People were getting divorces,
Yeah.
just, and I remember back when, say in the 70s, if you were a Democrat or Republican, you could still be friends. You didn't hate each other. And the Democrats and Republicans, they worked together. If it was a good bill, they worked together and passed it, like, civil rights and things like that, it was not a problem. But now it's like, it doesn't matter if it's a good bill or a bad bill.
I,
The Democrat will not vote for a Republican bill and vice versa. They just refuse to help each other in any way at all. So it's
yeah,
it's
I
it's
didn't know.
almost like they pick their team like it's a baseball team. Like these are my guys. It doesn't matter what they do, what they say. That's my guy.
Yeah,
Instead of like,
fights. Yeah,
I don't know. It's weird. Too
yeah,
much for me.
really tearing it up. Foreign countries can take advantage of that. Like they put their own, um, things on the internet, the false
Yeah.
fake news and everything else. And I don't trust anything I read.
Well, it's
So,
like
but
you
I'm
ever
a,
read Sun Tzu? You know, he said divide and conquer, and
yeah,
that's what they've done. That they've divided us. You know, they've taken the country and cut it in half.
yeah, yeah,
Mm,
evenly right down the middle. It seems like.
right. Yeah. Well, it's hard to believe that like half the country feels one way and half the other feels the other way. It doesn't seem like that would happen naturally. You know, I can't believe that it's
How can,
exactly almost always 50-50.
how can we
Mm.
be so divided? I've got friends here that I'm in a small town, grew up in a town of about 400 people in the Midwest, very conservative, and went to the same little school. There are only 13 kids in my class. There's probably 80 in all
God,
the.
that's small. Wow.
Yeah, and wow, we're split right down the middle here. I see them 40 years later, and it's sad. You
It
know.
is. Mm. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we've gone almost an hour here, Randy. It's been a fascinating conversation. Hope you'll come back again sometime and tell us some more stories. I'm sure you've got a lot of things to tell us, and I hope you find a great big mammoth tusk somewhere and put it over your mantelpiece in your house. You know, that would be so cool to have something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it would. I'd like to invite any if people are interested in that stuff. I've got a blog on Facebook. It's not a group. Well, I got a couple groups, but I have a blog where there's about 9,000 people following it, and it's just generally about things we find and things we learn about Ice Age fossils in North America.
Cool. Well, if you send me a link to that after we finish talking, I'll add it to the description of this video. And
Yeah,
also, some people said I misspelled amateur, which I'm dyslexic, so I will be correcting that. I know I misspelled it. I kind of knew I did it when I put it in there, so it didn't quite look right to me. So I will fix that. You know, I've never been good at spelling. So
Oh, yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
don't leave when we finish the conversation here, because we'll still be connected. So Randy, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, share it with your friends, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
All right, bye bye.